Well, at least Skeletor's furry fool made the first wave. Here's your look at the brand new Mattel He-Man and the Master Universe 80s Adventure Cartoon Collection Beastman. With Master Universe Cartoon Collection action figures, the magic of the 1980s childhood is back. Inspired by the Master Universe cartoon and toy line from the 80s, this line features key characters designed with a nostalgic look. Built with a 5.5-inch scale and 16 points of articulation for great battle moves and poses, they come with one accessory and a themed mini-comic. Beastman has a few accessories that we'll look at more in a moment. First, though, let's grab the tape measure and see how tall the brand new Cartoon Collection Beastman stands. I will say, at least from the figures that we're going to be looking at part of this first wave, Beastman is the one I think that looks the most like the cartoon. Color-wise, he's not the most accurate, but he's still pretty close. The figure, though, of Beastman stands 6 inches in height, or he's 15 centimeters tall. Bringing now Beastman's boss in, here's what the figure looks like with the Cartoon Collection Skeletor. And I think I know now what's bothering me about Skeletor's face is the fact it's way too big. In the cartoon, his face actually had a lot of black around it, especially underneath his chin. His face wasn't so close to the hood, and I think that's the thing that's thrown me off. Obviously, they could have gone still in there and painted around the areas of his teeth, but I think there really needed to be a lot more black underneath his chin, and that's the thing that's really throwing me off for the figure. The figure of Beastman is using the same body as Skeletor. It happens to also be using the same body as the earlier looked at Cartoon Collection He-Man. Arms, torso, lower legs are all shared between the two. Obviously different boots, different armor, and a brand new head sculpt. We can also as well bring in, for comparison's sake, the original Origins Beastman. Different body. I mean, obviously the Origins body would be all their own standalone series. They're a little bit shorter also as well, which I know, again, is one thing that's kind of bothering some He-Man collectors. They really wish that the line would have been scaled in size with one another. Beastman, if you look at him, I mean, he's not that much really taller than the one that we got here for the Origins line. And he isn't that much taller either than the Lords of Power Beastman, which would have obviously predated the design of Beastman. This was what the original Beastman would have looked like, and then they made, of course, the cosmetic changes, the real molding changes to give us the Beastman we all recognize now. Now, in the review of Skeletor, I had made the assumption that the mini-comic were all going to be different from each of the figures that we're going to be looking at. Now, of course, realizing I'm completely wrong. Beastman actually comes included with the same mini-comic as He-Man, Mask of the Magi. For one reasons unknown, I don't know why they decided to not have the same comic, or why not just have then unique comics with each of the characters. I don't know if the same is also going to be said for Man-at-Arms, that Man-at-Arms is not going to come included with Wizard's Vizard, the mini-comic that came included with Skeletor. If you're familiar with Mask of the Magi, then you probably are going to be then familiar with this, because of course it's the exact same comic that came included with He-Man. Paneled inside, of course, you got yourself Beastman. Stratos makes an appearance, even though Stratos really isn't part of this wave, nor is really Sorceress. Obviously, I did order this online. I don't even know if now they're doing still the same thing where, like, all the bubbles, for example, would have been completely blank if you bought this from a Canadian. Like, if it was international, for example, some of the bubbles in the past when we looked at Origins figures usually would have been blank. If you bought these, say, as a North American release, then they would have the word bubbles and you'd be able to follow along the story just a little bit better. On the back, of course, you're featured the advertisements for He-Man, Beastman, Man-at-Arms, and Skeletor. Anybody around right now checking down the boxes have checked off now everybody except for Man-at-Arms. We're going to be looking at the heroic Master of Weapons in the upcoming review. So same mini-comic, just to again show you guys, it's the same mini-comic that came included with He-Man. And again, I don't know if Man-at-Arms is going to come included with Wizard's Vizard. You'll just have to wait and find out. In the meantime, though, Beastman does come included with his whip. I was jokingly say it kind of looks like he's brewing himself like a cup of coffee. It kind of does look like a coffee cup. It happens to be the exact same one that we got included. I thought they may have changed it just a little bit, but other than just molding the plastic in a different color, they seem to be exactly the same whips with the exact same lengths as well. This does fit into his hand, though one of the benefits now of the cartoon collection is, you may have already noticed, all of the figures so far have had gripping hands. I don't think that's going to change at all when we look at Man-at-Arms. If we look, though, at the original Origins Beastman would have had then the monster hand. He doesn't have that this time around. He has two gripping hands, so he can not only wield the whip, which we can go ahead right now and just take the handle and hook it into his hand. I didn't also mention the review of Skeletor that I had a problem with his Havoc staff staying in his hand. I don't know why. It doesn't seem like they're gripping the accessories as well. Beastman seems to be holding his coffee percolator just as fine. I mean, it doesn't look like it's falling out of his hand. He also benefits now by having gripping hands on both sides, because now the figure can actually wield around with him the hover ray. The hover ray is seen in the episode The Dragon Invasion, and it's molded nicely here in dark gray plastic. he would have been holding it like this. And so you can take your figure, now that he has the benefit of now gripping hands on both sides, just bring the hands around, just kind of bring them close enough to at least together, and then you just take the handles then, do it on both sides. And if you succeed, I don't know why I'm struggling as much, we'll just clip his hands on both sides. There we go. You can actually have Beastman being displayed with a hover ray. A nice little accessory. This is one of those accessories, unlike Skeletor with the 2 masks, for example, or He-Man even with his extra sword. This is one I could actually see myself actually displaying with Beastman. A nice little included accessory. One, again, pulled from an episode of the original Master Universe. I'm just going to go ahead right now, remove the accessory, just put that off to the side. Getting, though, a closer look at Beastman. I did say one of the things that were a little off on the figure was the character's colors. In the cartoon, he's actually a little bit more of a darker orange than this sort of tang orange that we end up getting. But there's no denying, I feel at least, that the head sculpt is one of the best, if not the best, we've gotten so far from the cartoon collection. The head sculpt is fantastic. One thing that he also benefits from that He-Man and Skeletor neither can say is that he actually does have an expression on his face. I think that's one of the things that make this guy feel a little bit more like the cartoon. Yeah, I'm a little disappointed by the fact that the colors of his skin aren't really quite the same colors as he would have had in the cartoon. In the cartoon, in fact, actually, it's kind of more of a darker orange than this. But they probably decided to make it a little bit lighter of a color just so it would look a little bit more different than the fur that he has on his body. He has the armor. It isn't quite, though, the same armor that the original Origins figure would have had. Obviously, you can see the way that those just slide up the bicep. He actually holds his, or wears his, I would say, just a little bit higher. They seem to be identical to one another as well. They don't sit as loose either. Once you get them really over the bicep, there's really nothing moving these things around. So if you've ever had issues really with Beastman holding his armor on his shoulders, you're not going to have as many issues with the cartoon collection version of him. It seemed to stay pretty good in place. His armor, or his fur body, is very different than, of course, the original Origins and the original Vintage Beastman. It's a lot more spikier, a lot more furrier on this guy's armor, or on this guy's fur. This Beastman actually has just a little bit more of a furrier mane. He has a little nicely star-painted motif there in the middle of the armor piece. This is basically just attached on the back of his body, by the way. It's strapped, but it never stays properly. I mean, every single time I'm moving the figure around, I feel like it detaches. Once you get over really that one little ledge, you should be okay. But every time I'm moving the figure around, it always seems to want to start to loosen on the back of the figure's body. So you may come across that also if you get this figure for yourself. Colors are very nicely, though. You got the brighter colors of the pastel blue. The belt is also being used from the He-Man we looked at from before, so we can bring back in He-Man so you guys can see. Arms, top of his arms, or at least the lower forearms, his thighs and his lower legs are all the same. The only thing that's different is Beastman's obviously sporting a brand new pair of boots that He-Man wouldn't have had. Although, if you look at the boots, while the top is missing the fur on the top of his boot, the actual foot portion of the boot is actually exactly the same to He-Man's. They've just molded it in different red plastic instead. Still retains, again, those 2 big peg holes on the undersides of his feet. So if you did have yourself a display stand, not that they come included with them, but you can have the figures displayed on stands instead. Again, when it comes to the articulation on these figures, they're going to be exactly the same. Beastman's head is going to be on a rotational ball joint, so you can rotate the head all the way around. Even though he has the furry mane, it doesn't seem to prevent at all his head from moving up, down, and slightly rocking it back and forth as well. Arms do rotate also all the way around. That's the same on both sides. Just do that around. I mean, obviously, they should be working the exact same way, but just to show you guys, I'm not fibbing. I'd never fib you guys. You can bring those arms out at 90 degrees. He doesn't have any swiveling in his biceps, but what he does have, though, is he has swivels in his forearms that also has the single hinge in the elbow. Not only does it give him the hinge with additional articulation, but again, if you guys wanted to have these guys more in vintage poses, you can just bend the arms. I know we always keep showing you guys these. You can bring and bend the knees, and you can have Beastman sort of more in a vintage pose. Not my thing. Not my thing. I prefer the figures with the straighter legs myself. Beastman does have a waist swivel. Did I talk about the hands? Let's go back to his hands. The hands rotate all the way around. You can hinge them back and forth. Swivel in his waist. Yes. Split the legs out. Sure. You can see there's the ball joint inside the cavities of his thighs. Bring the legs forward and back. He has a single hinge only in the knee that allows the lower leg to rotate. He has a lower rotation in his boots. You can angle the ankle pivot angle up and down. You can also rock it back and forth as well. So again, all the same articulation, all the same posability, all the same moving parts as the earlier looked at He-Man and Skeletor. Again, for the comparison's sake of things, let's bring back in the Origins Beastman, you can see, and not getting this guy to fall in the process. Just get him to stand. There we go. Bring back in Lords of Power, Beastman. I know not really everyone's favorite Beastman. I collect it more for the nostalgia than anything else. And also at the time, I mean, he was pretty easy to find. He still probably continues to be an easy find. Let's again bring back in the earlier looked at Skeletor and bring in He-Man. You know, no, not that He-Man. That was the Origins He-Man. I just happen to have him off to the side. Let's bring in the proper He-Man. There's the He-Man from the cartoon collection. Liking the line. Still, Skeletor is the stumbler for me, at least. I still feel like he needed a little bit more black. Maybe that's the thing. Does it come in black? He just needs a little bit more of it around the hood area. But I don't think looks as good as his cartoon counterpart. Beastman looks fantastic, though. I know we haven't yet looked at Man-at-Arms. My opinions of that may change, but I think right now, surprisingly enough, if you believe it, Beastman is my favorite of the cartoon collection thus far. What you're currently looking at is the only episode-specific accessory that's going to stay with my collection when I put these figures on the shelf. Sure, it was nice that He-Man came included with the extra sword and that Skeletor had the 2 extra masks, but neither one of those will find their way onto the figures when I have them on display. I do appreciate that they included the hover ray, and it's an interesting enough accessory that if I don't decide to display with Beastman, I'm sure probably going to be displaying with one of the other henchmen of Skeletor when we get them in future waves. It's a nice little accessory. It isn't even so little either. It's quite a large piece, and at least he has, unlike the earlier Origins Beastman, at least he has means with gripping hands now on both sides of the figure's body. For his body, at least, the colors are a little off, but if you can overlook that little oversight, the figure is nicely sculpted. I like the way they've sculpted the beard around the bottom of his face, and of course, he has the benefit of having an expression, something that neither Skeletor or He-Man could actually say. So far, yes, he is my favorite from this. I mean, I don't know if that's going to necessarily change when we look at Man-at-Arms. It could very well be. But right now, Man-at-Arms is still contained inside his plastic prison. His review, though, will be right around the corner. Have you guys been collecting any of the cartoon characters? The Filmation series or cartoon collection, the new Master Universe cartoon collection, is available right now in retail. I can't even finish that sentence. I would have normally said in retail stores, but Canada, I mean, you're never going to be able to find these in Canadian stores. Watch this now be the time. I just finished recording. I go to Toys R Us, and sure enough, there's hundreds of these all down the aisle. It's never going to happen. I'm going to always have to order these, unfortunately, online. But have you guys fared better when it comes to finding these in local stores? Let me know down below in the comments section. And if you have been collecting any of these, if you guys did enjoy this video, I want to throw it a like. If you guys are loving the content you guys are seeing and on board to see the review of Man-at-Arms, his review, can't even get that all out, is right around the corner. So making sure, of course, you're keeping your Masters of the Universe peepers peeled to this channel. And as always, guys, thanks for watching. See you guys next time.